midst of who we start the show with, because I can't believe we started with Biden again.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
2/3 say they
Read
don't.
the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote for me.
A majority of Democrats say they don't want you to run again in 2024.
92% said if I did, they'd vote for me.
So, folks, welcome to GAMcast for July 13th, 2022. A lot to unpack in that little bit there from Biden. A lot really going on there. If you know your history, of course we do. So anyway, it is a rainy day in Georgia, which is just terrific because we need the rain, and frankly, it needs to cool off. It's been a little less humid lately. So a lot to talk about today because, it's a slow news day. And, folks, this stuff is all planned. I mean, it's July. I understand that. People are on vacation. It's the summer. I get that. But you can just see it if you follow the news and you're a student of the news. You can just see that January 6th happened yesterday. Yes, we're going to cover January 6th. And so today they're leaving time for the talking heads to just lie about what January 6th committee did yesterday. We'll cover that and tell you what they did. We're going to cover the Biden bit. We're going to talk about a seismic shift that may be coming in our electorate. You're going to want to stick around for that. It's probably going to be the thing that we cover first. But there is something that could be developing out there. I've just sort of noticed it the last couple of days. I've been talking about it for a long time, but it looks like it may actually come to fruition in November of 2022, which frankly would be great, and we need it. So we're also going to talk about some of the transgender craziness. We're going to talk about Khiara Bridges and just a bunch of other things as per usual. I'm going to try to beat the clock as I did yesterday. Yesterday, folks, was not forced. I heard from some of you that said that, again, the I feel cheated crowd. Trust me, I never cheat you. I feel guilty if I don't make sure you know about all the stories that you need to know about and the background for them. So trust me, if I only did 20 minutes or 25 minutes or however long I did, I upload so much content right now, I frankly can't really remember how long it was. I know it was shorter. I did have some technical difficulties, but trust me, I never let that kind of thing interfere with getting the job done. And just so you know that, to be honest, what I could have done and I didn't do, if I needed more time, I could have just delayed and dropped GAMcast or, after covering the committee. I didn't. I did it first because I knew I just didn't need that much time because there wasn't that much going on. So a little bit more going on today, still not a lot. Again, I could get you up to date in about 5 minutes if I wanted to. So without further ado, let's replay Biden. Because I want you to understand, this little bit, a lot of people are talking about it. And as you know, I don't typically talk about what other people are talking about. But a lot of people are talking about this, and they're sort of acting like, 92 or 95%, whatever it was, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, that he's focusing on the fact that 92% of Democrats said in that New York Times CNN poll that they would vote for Biden if it were Biden versus Trump. Now, that tells you a lot of things that's going on, but it also leads us to the seismic shift in the electorate that we're seeing. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But what I think it also proves what I've been saying for a long time in at least two respects. One, these people are building an electorate. They are patiently building an electorate that is unavailable, right, to be swayed. It's like we used to do it, and unfortunately now that we're on YouTube and the copyright grift that they've been working, I can't do it anymore. But right now, when we were doing the old podcast format, I would do the old Terminator thing where you can't reason with it. This thing, you can't, negotiate with it. All it cares about doing is this. And that's what they're trying to do. They want to build an electorate that they can just lie to, that they can steal power and money from. That's all it's about, transfer of power and money to them so they go live like kings and queens, right, and rule over you. That's all it's designed to do. And what they can't, among the things they can't stand about the American system, believe me, the biggest thing they can't stand is government of the people, by the people, and for the people, the central tenet of the rule of law and the Constitution. That's what they hate the most. They think they should rule over you, and they think they should live a separate life from you. And they've convinced a lot of people of that. And every day we see it all the time, and people will say, oh, this is hypocrisy. It's not hypocrisy. They're not hypocrites. They honestly believe it. That's why Hillary Clinton can go off and make speeches and become a multi-millionaire, right? And nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's because they want Hillary to make that kind of money. They want Barack Obama living in his 25,000 square foot mansion. That's what they want. Not all of them, but a great deal of them. And so Anyway, but getting back to the point, 92%. So, but that poll, basically, Biden's approval was awful. 65% or 2/3 want somebody else to run. But consistent with what I've been telling you, you know what? We're going to vote for whoever the Democrats put up. And this isn't a new phenomenon. I grew up with the term yellow dog Democrat, which meant you could run a yellow dog and it would win if it was a Democrat. Now, that was in the old South, and there was, what is it? William Faulkner said, the past is not forgotten. It's not even past. That was largely because, the Republicans came and occupied the South after the Civil War, and people just were so resentful of that they didn't care. They were going to vote Democrat, and they did well into the 1980s, in large part, except for North Carolina. But anyway, all right. The other thing about this is it also proves what a jerk Biden is, okay? And I got to be honest with you. I got a little feedback on the names the other day, so I want to be fair about this, so I'm going to try to be a little bit more circumspect on the names. So I don't agree this time with what the person was saying. I respect what people have to say, so we'll try and be a little bit calmer. It wasn't about Biden, it was about someone else. It wasn't even my name, as per usual, but whatever. Anyway, so I've told you for a long time, and if you're on the YouTube and you're listening to us, the first video we did before we got into the copyright, we started, and then because of the copyright stuff, which again is awful that they do this to content creators, but it's by design, we started probably about 3 months ago doing stuff on YouTube, and then we got caught up in that, and I had to figure that out. So we lost like 2 months. So there was a couple of videos done, and then there's like a 2-month lag, and then we start doing videos again about a month ago. So anyway, but the first ever video we did was of Biden ruining the Senate judiciary confirmation process with Thomas Sowell. I highly recommend it. It's a very good 20-minute bit, and you can get a sense of what kind of a jerk he is there. But here he is, dementia or not, all right? This is typical Joe Biden, and it just goes to show you what I say all the time. The problem with these Democrats and the way in which they've been taken over by the type of person they've been taken over, it's not so much, it is their policies, and it is that they lie. But the other problem is their temperament. They don't have the appropriate temperament to govern over people. Take a listen to President Biden being confronted with something. And again, I want you to think how easy it would be to just go, I don't pay attention to polls. I'm busy taking care of America. I don't have time for the polling or this and that. Notice how easy it is to do that, right? You could sit there, and if you were helping, if you were the chief of staff, if you were Ron Klain for the president, you could write on a note card 10, or if you don't want to make it easy for him, right, because he's got some mental decline there, write 5 things on a note card. I don't pay attention to polls. You know what? You guys cover things like that, but I have to do the work of the American people, and I do that 24/7, 365. Something, whatever. Just put 4 or 5 of them on a note card so that you ever get a thing, you don't have to do this. But here he is. This is his true colors. And what is it Maya Angelou says to us? The first time a person shows you who they truly are, believe them.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who don't want you to run again?
They want me to run.
Now, again, I want you to notice he's walking away from the reporter. The reporter shouts it out. He could have easily just kept walking, but he didn't. He had to stop and say this.
Read the polls. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same.
Read the polls, Jack. Read the polls, Jack. You guys are all the same. Now, folks, what do you mean you guys are all the same? His approval rating is dismal. He's getting below Trump, folks. And again, I wish I had the ability to do a model. We're going to get to 538 here in a bit. One of my favorite models. I wish they weren't left wing, and I wish they hadn't corrupted themselves. But anyway, they used to do better models than they do, but they still do a good model. I'd like to see somebody do a model that accounts for the bias. In other words, what would have Trump's approval rating been had he gotten the Biden treatment that Biden gets? I mean, Biden has approval below Trump, and he has awful press coverage. If you flipped it, Trump would have easily coasted to re-election, even with COVID and even with the tweeting. But anyway, it continues a little bit.
That poll showed that 92% of Democrats, if I ran, would vote.
All right, the other thing I wanted to cover that again, so I covered it twice, is, folks, it shows his true character. He's just not a nice person. He never has been. Some people, they just grow older. They don't get any better. They don't try to improve themselves. Joe Biden is a perfect example of that. Here's the other thing I want you to understand. To the extent he knows what's going on, this is the type of person that he has surrounded himself with. That doesn't say, well, Mr. President, these polling numbers, they're bad, right? This is a person who goes to him and says, sir, the way you read this poll is 92% of the people, if it was between you and Trump, would vote for you. Doesn't say anything about what happened if it was another Republican. Doesn't say anything about, well, sir, look, the good news is that 92% would support you. The bad news and what we need to work on, and so you don't get any of that. Anyway, So here's the seismic shift. I very rarely read Axios. Axios is one of those brands that's out there that tries to. The Democrats do this all the time. You have to give them credit. Well, I shouldn't say the Democrats, the left. The left, who has co-opted the Democrat Party. There was a time the Democrat Party didn't have this, and they still have a few people that don't. But basically, they can never really win an argument. So they try to find ways to convince you emotionally, right? And one of the tricks that they try to use to control you emotionally, right, again, is to try to rig the rational debate. So Axios is an example of that. They had this whole new way of approaching things. So you'll have a headline, and then you'll have a Democrats now have, and why it matters, and what's happening, and the real truth. And so it's kind of laid out, kind of like USA Today came along, and stories on one page and a lot of pictures and whatnot. Axios is a group like that where they've tried to co-opt the argument by presenting it in a different way, but it's still the same corporate leftist media nonsense. Anyway, one big thing, a seismic shift. Democrats now have a bigger advantage among white college graduates than they do with non-white voters. Axios' Josh Krashour writes from a New York Times Siena College poll. We're going to get to that in a minute. Why it matters. We're seeing a political realignment in real time. Now, here's how you know Axios is left-wing. The real point of what I'm about to go over has nothing to do with what it just said. There's a much bigger shift that's going on that they should have led with, okay? And we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, it just goes to show you the same old thing, promoting, oh, look, we're doing better with college whites, or college-educated whites, right? Anyway, Democrats are becoming the party of upscale voters, concerned more about issues like gun control and abortion rights. Republicans quietly building a multiracial coalition of working-class voters with inflation as an accelerant. And again, they're putting it in, folks, the accelerant was happening with Donald Trump before inflation hit anywhere near where it is now, right? This whole race grift is on a collision course. And again, I think we may be seeing a seismic shift because I'm not so sure they're going to be able to pull it off. It's going to be close. It's going to be a bang-bang play, trust me. But I think there's signs out there that say that enough Republican of color are going to elected and start running, and persons of color are going to start seeing through the veil of these Democrat policies that are not about their supposed pigmentation, but they're really just about seizing power from them. And they're starting to see that. And the other problem that they've got is these upscale voters more concerned about issues like gun control and abortion rights. Well, I agree they're concerned about abortion rights. Gun control, not so much. And the dirty little secret nobody wants to tell anybody, folks, if you want to have an honest conversation, I'll be happy to have it. The fact of the matter is we've had every rational gun policy on the books legally for about, 40, 50, 60 years, right? There are no more laws you can pass. By God, I wish there was, but there aren't. We're basically as good as you're going to do, right? But anyway, so a little bit more on this article. We're going to get to the other thing. What's happening? House Republicans boast this year's class of new candidates is the most diverse in history. That's true. I've been telling you that for a long time. A lot more Republicans, a lot more Hispanics, a lot more Asians running under the GOP banner. To be fair, so too I believe you're going to see record numbers on the Democrat banner. Okay. Anyway, so it continues. In the Times Siena poll, Dems hold a 20-point advantage over Republicans among white college-educated voters, but are statistically tied among Hispanics. Hispanic voters back Democrats by a nearly 50-point margin in 2018 midterms. Did you hear that? 50-point margin, now tied in 4 years, a little under 4 years, right? In the 2016 congressional elections, Dems lost white voters with a bachelor's degree, which is consistent. If only white voters, if we had the same electorate we had, for example, in 1980 or 1988, Trump would have trounced Biden. Wouldn't even be close. So let's get to the Siena poll. Well, actually, before we get to the Siena poll, I pulled up, again, one of my favorite sites out there to go get the news. It has some really good, not news, but data. Has some really good models, and their models are good. I think I've mentioned this before. It's called 538 blog. It's all spelled out, 530 and 8 all together, 538.com. I always put in 538 blog in my Google, and since I've been following them since they were associated with the New York Times, it comes up. Maybe that's unique to my Google, doesn't matter. Anyway, you'll find them, okay? It's Nate Silver's group up there. And they've got a couple of forecasts. And one of the things that struck me, I believe it was yesterday. Right now, I'm looking dead at it. If you're on YouTube, you're looking dead at it with me. And so the 2022 House forecast is 87% of the time House is retaken by the GOP. Obviously, 13% it's held by the Democrats. 54% chance in the Senate compared to a 46% chance, which means there's a 1% chance it remains tied. Now, folks, that struck me because that is, by my math, a 33% difference between the House and the Senate. What's the big difference between the House and the Senate? Well, the big difference between the House and the Senate is it's the electorate of the House is a lot closer to the people. The electorate to the Senate is a lot further from the people, right? Which is to say you're not running in close-knit groups, you're running in the state. So they have a little bit of a built-in advantage in the state, just like the Republicans have a little built-in advantage in the Electoral College. Now, what does that tell you just from a 30,000 foot level? It tells you that the Democrats are a national party. They play a national game, right? So the average person in a local district voting for a congressperson, they're going to care a lot more about the potholes, about the inflation, about jobs, about security, things like that. If you're voting for a statewide office, right, and it's like, well, this is the person representing the entire state. I mean, you begin to get more concerned about things like January 6th and, vague notions of democracy and Republican, all this nonsense that they talk about. So I just wanted to run that by you. And again, I encourage you to take a look at that forecast. And we're going to be covering it at the closer as we get to September. It's interesting. I looked at the Senate forecast just in case those of you are interested. And it looked to me like the most likely outcome if the election were today, based on my read of it, would be that Georgia would flip to Republican, and Pennsylvania would flip to Democrat, and then it would all really come down to Nevada, which I thought was interesting. But we shall see. We'll keep an eye on that going forward. So let's get to the Times poll. This is the actual article on the polling here. And again, folks, I know how to read the polls. I mean, is like the great Rush Limbaugh used to say, I can see the stitches on the fastball as it comes. I've been looking at polls so long I can't even remember, well over 45 years. And I know the ins and the outs of them. So I know what the garbage is in here and what the garbage isn't. And this is a garbage poll, this New York Times CNN poll. It's complete garbage. And I'll tell you why in a minute, but it doesn't matter anyway. Poll shows tight race for control of Congress as class divide widens. Non-white and working-class Democrats worry more about the economy, while white college graduates focus more on issues like abortion rights and guns. Now, folks, a lot of people might say, well, if you've got a college degree, you make a little bit more money, and so you're not as concerned about, bread and butter issues. That's not true, folks. What's happening is, and folks, these people in colleges knew that. When we get to Khiara Bridges, you're going to understand. When I went to college, it hadn't gotten to the place where it is now. It was still a place where they were very, very politically left. I mean, I went to University of North Carolina system, and then there's University of North Carolina system, right? And then there's communism, and they're kind of tied. And then there's Chapel Hill, which is to the left of communism, which is the flagship. But they've gone all of them have just gone left upon left upon left. And they no longer really teach anything. I mean, they don't really care about facts. I mean, it used to be they gave you the facts, they gave you the education, and then they tried to proselytize and try to convince you that the left, FDR way was the best way. Now, they don't even bother to teach you anything. I mean, I don't think if I had any children, I would recommend they go to college at this juncture. In fact, I would caution against it unless it was a certain kind of college. Anyway, with President Biden's approval rating mired in the 30s, folks, think about how terrible you have to be a Democrat and get fawning press 24/7, 365 and be in the 30s. Okay, the last few presidents that were in the 30s were Republicans, Bush and Trump. And I got to be honest, a lot of people remember Trump. I tell you, Bush didn't get much better. I mean, they were just every day it was get up and, how can we present this person in a bad light? And when with Trump, it actually got to the point where, if we can't present him in a bad light, we'll just make it up. At least with Bush, they had to try to find something. But anyway, with nearly 80% of the voters saying the country's headed in the wrong direction, all the ingredients seem to be in place for a Republican sweep in November and September elections. But Democrats and Republicans begin the campaign in a surprisingly close race of Congress, according to the first New York Times Siena College survey of the cycle. Now, folks, right now, let me pause and stop and tell you what this is designed to do. This is designed to get Democrats a little bit bucked up so they'll write checks. Okay, and this is just simple. You can see it coming right away. I'm looking at the thing. What is your preference for the outcome of the 2022 elections? 41% want Democrat control, 40% want Republican control, 19% want other. Well, you ain't going to get other because last I checked, this ain't France. Last I checked, this in Germany, we don't have like 15 parties that have to form coalitions. So right there, that tells you, that should ring off, ding, 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 what's going on. It's only 81%. What about the other 19%? Now, and I haven't dug into the internals of the poll. I don't have time to do it, and it's not a point in doing it. We'll look at it over time. But you got to understand, when you read a poll, one of the first things you want to try to figure out is, what's the angle here? What could possibly be the angle? And in fact, let's do it in real time. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to be on the Google. Let's go to Real Clear Politics, BAMO. Let's go over here to polls, latest polls, and let's see if we can find congressional vote. Here it is. Binga, binga, binga. Survey says Republicans 1.9. All right. And what you see there is you see two polls, which is weird because they have the Republican reverse. But anyway, you have two polls lately saying Democrats, and you got registered voters, likely voters, you got a bunch of stuff. But there's no way that the Republicans are down one, or it's that close right now. Anybody that's making any sense. But it looks like the Republican advantage is down a little bit since the last time I checked it. But anyway, one of the motivations for doing this is, if you see it tied, that's bucking up Democrats, because they need a little bucking up, need to make sure that checkbook gets open. So anyway, you got the numbers there. Among likely voters, Republican led by, this is, okay. So the original poll was apparently registered, it's 41, Democrat 40, and then when they go to likely, which is really all that matters, then Republicans pick up a point, and it's 44, 43. So some of those 19% becomes 13% that don't know. Anyway, scroll all the way down, you see the biggest point in the article. For the first time in a Times CNN national survey, Democrats had a larger share of support among white college graduates than among non-white voters, a striking indication of the shifting balance of political energy in the Democrat coalition. As recently as the 2016 congressional elections, Democrats won more than 70% of non-white voters, while losing among white college graduates. Now, it goes down to talk about gerrymandering and all this other stuff, and goes on. They don't really talk about the shift among Hispanics as much as they should. So this is why you might be seeing a shift here. Let me break these numbers down to you. They're all concerned about college-educated whites. And you know why they're concerned about college-educated whites? Because that's their bread and butter. That's the people that they've managed to shift over and win districts, like they won Newt Gingrich's old district, went to some radical leftist a little while ago. It's hard to believe that. But everywhere I drive in here, people are not just voting for the Democrat, but, I mean, you're talking about radical Democrats. The fact that Raphael Warnock has a snowball's chance in Georgia with his policies, it shows you how crazy things have gotten. Now, the reason for that is he's going to get a lot of support from the black community, right? And in Georgia, that's got you 30, 35, 36% right there. All you got to do is cobble together a little 13, 14 more percent, and you're over the top. Now, his policies are so radical, normally you wouldn't have been able to do that. You'd have to run somebody that was a little bit more closer to the edge, right? But you've got Ossoff, who kind of sneaked in under that bizarre 2020 election, and then Warnock. I don't think it's going to worry, but that's who they care about. They love college-educated whites because they've gone to school and they've been brainwashed, and they're just insane. And they don't vote based on real policies. They vote on things that you can just make them believe, right? You tell them something and it becomes true. Like, we almost lost our democracy on January 6th. Well, the certification was stopped for like 4 hours, and then they brought them back 4 hours later. And so no, and even if they had captured people and stopped the certification, that wouldn't have made Trump a dictator, right? I mean, you can't, but again, they've been trained so they can't be talked out of these things. And here's the other thing that's not in these stories. And I did a little looking before the show. I want to make sure you understood. Right now, just so you understand how there could be an easier shift, folks, it all matters about working class voters. Okay, and none of these articles tell you this, and none of the stories that I've heard today or seen on Twitter talk about this. Let me give you the breakdown of non-college educated folks by race. Are you ready? Okay. College-educated whites, 35%. That means 65% aren't. So I tell you what, Democrats, if you want to swap out the college-educated for the non-college-educated white, take that deal all day long. All day long. Used to be the reverse, by the way. Blacks, 21% have a college degree, right? Think about that. That means 79% do not. Happy to make that exchange all day long and twice on Sunday. Hispanics, 15% college educated. 85% non-college educated. You wonder why overall you're 50-50 with Hispanics, which I don't believe you are. I think you're underwater with Hispanics. There you go, right there. Asians is the only group that you would make that bargain with, 54% college educated. All right, folks, that's where they are now. They don't mention that in there, but I saw it. And folks, the reason for that is, it's actually, before I switch to the reason for that and also explain about the college and the lunacy that we're seeing out there, this song, and I'm only going to play a little bit of it because the copyright Nazis are after me. This is not a copyright violation. This is fair use or fair dealing. If you go by British common law, we call it fair use in American common law, okay? This is absolutely appropriate because I am using it for satire, for learning, for training, and for commentary, all right? There's no reason this should be flagged. If it gets flagged, I'll get it unflagged. But anyway, this came up in my Twitter feed last night, and this is a breaking bombshell video. I'm only going to play a little bit of it because of the copyright Nazis, but anyway. I'm only going to play a little bit of it. You can go get it yourself. If you go on Twitter, I think Twitter's open now, which means if you want to follow the Twitter feed of mine, it's @male_American. Remember, it's M-A-L, not M-A-L-E. You can follow it on your own. Okay, which means you don't have to. It's not like Facebook. You go to Facebook and you try to find somebody. I'm not on Facebook, but if you go on Facebook, try to find somebody. If you don't have a Facebook account, can't go further. Twitter's not like that. You can go to Twitter, @male_American Twitter, put it in the Google. I will pop up and you can see everything I'm talking about. And it's in the feed anyway. If you want to go to this guy, go to the Twitter, @RealBrysonGray, BRYSON, Gray, Gray, okay, @RealBrysonGray, and Gray, you'll see the song. Anyway, here's a little bit of it. Take a listen. Okay, why is it not going? Well, we got technical difficulties here. All right, while we got technical difficulties here, let me tell you a little bit more about the song. This is a song by a black man, okay? I shouldn't have to tell you that, but unfortunately I do. And it's a song by a black man about Hunter Biden. He wrote this. He said right here, I'll just read the tweet. I made a song about Hunter Biden's iCloud getting hacked. It's really about Joe Biden, but a little bit of Hunter Biden. Anyway, play a little bit of it, and then we'll get on to the Professor Khiara Bridges. All right, more technical difficulties. I don't know why I'm having technical difficulties the last couple of days, but I have. That's all right. We can fix it in real time. I don't understand that. It just gets on my nerves, but that's all right. Here we go. Let's try it one more time. Here's Bryson Gray, his new song about Joe and Hunter Biden.
They gon' hate me for this one. Hey, you know what's really wild? Got your own son calling you a pedophile. Why you getting called that by your own child? They say Pedro Peter every time the phone down. Wow, Hunter arguing with hookers while he wearing crack. Whoa, they call it a conspiracy, but I'm saying facts. Whoa, in the mansion up in Cali, but who pay for that? Whoa, the media gon' cover it up like he ain't get hacked. Whoa, here we go again. If it was
all right, folks, if you want to hear more, I got to stay clear of the Twitter Nazis and the YouTube Nazis. So anyway, all right. So yesterday, the Senate decided to have a hearing on the impact of Dobbs and all this stuff. And folks, I want you to understand, again, I didn't realize how bad things were until I went on this journey, which I started when I opened a Twitter account in August of 2020 and then started doing a podcast in August of 2021. And I didn't realize how bad things were. I knew they were bad. But I've learned so much since I started doing this. Like I told you already about the memory hole thing from 1984, where they literally would go back and delete things from history. And the reason it's called a memory hole is in the novel, there were people whose actual job it was to go cut things out of newspapers and cut things out of books, and then they would put it in a little cartridge and they would go drop it in a hole where it would be incinerated. And then it would never appear to be again. So memory hold is the term. So many things have been memory hold and whatnot. But, the Senate and the House, especially the House, but the Senate also, they had these hearings now about nonsense. I mean, go when you get time. I hadn't had time to do it. I just got other things to cover. But I would love to sit down and just pull up a list of the bills or debates or committee hearings that Democrats are having. It's about stuff like, is there a Peter Pan? Is there really a boogeyman under your bed? The Uniform Price Gouging Act of 2022, the bring down inflation, the make the great American male 8 feet tall. I'm not kidding you. And they have these hearings and stuff over stuff that has nothing to do with anything in reality. Now, the reason I brought up Bryson Gray is, folks, people like that, I mean, that thing got 1 million views. Okay, at least, and I hadn't looked. Last time I checked, it was 1 million in less than 24 hours. Okay, and that's on Twitter. He dropped it on Twitter. Twitter's left wing, folks. If you're doing that well on Twitter, if he was on some sort of right wing or they weren't suppressing him, God only knows what he'd get. And that's a black man singing about Hunter Biden and what's going on. And again, if you read his feed, and I took a time to read a little bit of his feed, the main thing that's pushing him are these social issues. He don't like any of this social stuff, right? I don't know what his idea is on economics and foreign policy, and I frankly don't care. Whatever brings people over to the rule of law and the Constitution, I'm for. But, folks, these people are playing a dangerous game, right? A dangerous game. And again, I've said this before. Leftists used to understand, look, you can push your left-wing ideology, right? But you got to make sure the daggum train is running on time. You got to make sure people can put food on the table. Then go and brainwash their kids all you want into thinking this and thinking that. That's always what leftism's been about, right? And you go back and look at any left wing, look at the Nazis in Nazi Germany. I mean, they made sure that people got educated, that their children could walk up and down the street safely. You go back and do some reading about Germany in the 30s and 40s, and see what happened to people that went after old people and went after children. You didn't last long at all. They had security, right? Anyway, and then once they provided that, then they went and did a bunch of stuff they had no business doing. Our leftists today are so incompetent. They don't understand that, right? That's why you got people like Biden in there. Biden's the kind of guy, listen, he lacks compunction. You need somebody to go burn somebody's factory down, and you need somebody to go take somebody out. He's your guy. You don't put him in charge of the enterprise, for crying out loud. Anyway, so this is Josh Hawley. He's asking Professor Khiara Bridges some questions. And again, this is ostensibly a committee hearing about the impact of the Dobbs decision. I don't know what this got to do with governance, because the federal government has no business having anything to do with abortion. Zero zilch nada. It's a state issue. But they've decided to have a hearing about it. I want you to listen to this exchange. Are you kidding me with what is with my computer today? Come on. Okay, Josh Hawley and Professor Bridges. One more time.
Before
trying it for a third time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Before I want to visit with you, Ms. Minsky, but before I do, I just want to clear one thing up. Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so
now if you're on the YouTube, you're seeing the expression, which is part of the reason I moved over to this format. And you really need to. But I think it comes across, back when I was purely doing the podcast and I could only do audio, I had a good ear for things coming across. And I think that came across to you, how condescending she is, okay? Now, I looked her up, all right? She's a recent graduate. She graduated from Spelman, and then she got a full ride to go to Columbia. She got a law degree, and then she got another full ride to go get a PhD. She's been in education all of her life, okay? She is a privileged individual. She's actually a relatively attractive black woman. She's got a bunch of, nose rings and whatnot. I don't really know what that has to do with much of anything. But anyway, you kind of give you a little picture of this person, but you can see how condescending she is. Now, I want you to understand, she's an academic. She's lived her whole life in academia. Right? She doesn't look like she's had a hard day in her life or missed a meal or had really anything. Now, I got no problem with that, other than the fact that generally if you don't have a little dirt on you, I don't trust you as much. But I want to understand where the condescension comes from. Josh Hawley is an educated senator. He's asking a perfectly simple question. If you have a disagreement, then explain what the disagreement is, right? But anyway, you get a feel for the type of person that you're dealing with. She continues.
View is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic.
Okay, I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic. Now, again, this is an old grift from these people. It's an old grift, and I've seen it from the very beginning. It's all about censorship. I want to recognize it's transphobic. In other words, I'm not going to have this debate. Now, I want you to understand when this first comes out, what they're trying to do, and I called it from the very beginning. This is 20, 30 years ago. I was like, wait a minute. But, if that's it, then we can't debate this issue. Oh, no, it's not that. It's just that what you're saying is so out of bounds. I mean, no. I'm happy to debate anything, but not that, and not that, and not that, and not that. And by the way, I'm the arbiter of what we're going to debate, right? So she just doesn't want to have a rational debate. So she starts to say it's transphobic. She continues.
And it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing.
How in the world does it open up to violence? And again, I'm sick and tired of hearing about these threats and the this and that. I want to see facts. I want to see real facts here. Let's see if she's got any.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think.
So what? So what? I'm guessing if you're a transgender person, you're probably not in the greatest of mental health to begin with. But how do you know that it's your policies, right? Right? How does she know it's Hallie's policies of saying, I'm just saying that women are the ones that give birth and not your policies, lady? And again, imagine being this woman who's had such a special life. Imagine being a professor at a prestigious university like this. You've gone and you got all this education. I'm grateful for my education. And then you have no feeling to discuss with people in a rational manner, to have solutions for people. That you just can point out, you know better than everyone else. I know what's better for everyone else. What's better for everyone else is you be quiet and you do what I tell you. And then when I say, okay, well, let's demonstrate how I'm doing violence. Oh, no, 1 in 5 commit suicide, therefore you need to shut up.
Because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So
pregnant.
you're denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway, folks, that's your new millionaires, okay? That's what this society has created. All right, we got to finish up here. We're right on the mark here. So anyway, this is a story. I don't have a lot of time to cover it, but my brother's pregnancy and the making of a new family. When the call came, my brother was at work in the open office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He shares with 7 colleagues who, like him, help run clinical trials for a drug developer. The phone number came up blocked, so he knew it must be the doctor. He stood up unsteady on his feet. Was he a little nauseous, or was it just the adrenaline? He ducked into the hallway in search of quiet. My brother, Evan, 35, is a stocky guy of medium height with a trimmed, fuzzy blonde beard, 2 gem studs in his earlobe. He usually wears a Red Sox hat, and when he's nervous, he'll remove it and obsessively bend the rim. But on that September afternoon, both of his hands were clutching the phone, the right one cupping the left ear for privacy. Hello, this is Dr. Kowalt. Anyway, it goes on to basically be told that he's pregnant. Now, folks, unfortunately on this one, you do need to see the picture. And I would encourage you to go to the Google and put in my brother's pregnancy and Time, as in Time magazine, and look at the picture. Now, folks, I read that paragraph, the first 2 paragraphs, and folks, this is the world that Khiara Bridges is trying to create. But we're the ones that are responsible for all this. All right, let's get to the January 6th committee, and then I'm going to wrap it up. So the January 6th committee, as you know, we live streamed it. If you go to YouTube and if you subscribe, you will get notifications that we did 3.5 hours of it, 3 hours of which was committee. It was awful. They did as they usually do, but they're getting worse. Yesterday, they probably spent about 80% of the time talking amongst themselves. I kid you not. They all just came on and made testimony themselves. They played a few blurbs. They had about, 10% of a couple of witnesses who were clearly plants. Anyway, here's something that they played. This is a Twitter person that testified yesterday. I want you to take a listen to this. Oh, come on. Are you kidding me? I don't know why it's doing this. It's bizarre. Anyway.
The night of January 5th.
I believe I sent a Slack message to someone that said something along the lines of, when people are shooting each other tomorrow, I will try and rest in the knowledge that we tried. And so
All right, we'll do more of this tomorrow. I've got to wrap it up. But basically, that's a Twitter employee they played. Obviously, the voice has been put over. They said for their safety. And the point is, when people are dying in the streets. Now, nobody died. Nothing like that ever happened. But they played that yesterday with all sincerity. Anyway, we'll cover more of that tomorrow. You're now all caught up to date. And if you like this live stream, I hope you tune back in tomorrow.